What are the absolute worst decisions you can make in Shadow of the Erdtree? As a DLC with an actually fairly linear main storyline, there aren't too many opportunities to make actual consequential choices, or just to generally screw up. But in this video, we'll be looking at 5 points of the game where you can. Whether it be by locking yourself out of quests, doing things that are morally questionable, or just generally making combat even more difficult. So, let's get to it. Up first, Hornsent Grandam is an NPC found in Bayle who can provide a mini questline for the Tarnished. However, she's also one that's easy to miss, as even if you come across her room amidst the ruins, you'll first find it to be locked, and it's not until finding the storeroom key just a little further in that we can return to this place to gain access. Now, at first, Hornsent Grandam will fully mistake the Tarnished for an agent of Messmer, dismissing us and warning that we'll face the ire of the Divine Beast. And indeed, by progressing through the city, we will stumble into the Divine Beast's theatre, which, through the prayers of Hornsent Grandam, will be re-imbued with power for us to fight. The first remembrance boss of the DLC for many of us, and if you want to know more on the Beast's lore, then I discuss that in Chapter 1 of my DLC bosses video. But defeating the Dancing Lion, it'll drop a Divine Beast head, garb of the Sculpted Keepers, and wearing this for ourselves will finally grant audience with Hornsent Grandam, who now believes us to be one of her own.
Oh, such a joy to smell the scent again. Does a sculpted keeper stand before me? Oh, as I felt the sacred beast's essence fade, a great anxiety welled up within. Forgive this old woman her foolish fears.
I mean, I feel kinda bad, but at the same time, if she's happy, then we don't need to explain that we're wearing the head of the beast that we slew. It sounds as though she smells things more than sees them anyway. From this point on, the quest is pretty much plain sailing. Returning to her multiple times will yield multiple rewards, right up until we defeat Messmer, a deed which will finally provide Hornsent Grandam the relief that she needs to fall into a deep, possibly eternal slumber, concluding her dialogue and role within the game. So what is the bad decision that we can make here? Well, for Hornsent Grandam especially, it is all too possible to miss her quest entirely. After defeating the Dancing Lion, the game never implicitly sends you back to the lower regions of Bayle, and without returning to this door after obtaining the key to begin with, it becomes increasingly easier to completely miss Hornsent Grandam's quest, powering on to the Shadowkeep and defeating Messmer simply too early. After all, Messmer's defeat is sensed by Hornsent Grandam, and that's what triggers her unresponsive sleep. If we've never spoken to her before this point, then we never will. In fact, a good rule for the entire game really is to always reload areas and speak to NPCs multiple times until they're repeating themselves. And every time something notable happens in the game, for instance the breaking of Miquella's rune, to return to and speak to every NPC in case of some new dialogue. In fact, there's a great couple of Reddit posts by a Reddit user named Stellarwand for completing all of the Elden Ring NPC quests in order, which I'll link down below. It's a fantastic guide for anyone wanting to wring out those extra bits of lore. In terms of what you'll miss out on by missing Hornsent Grandam's questline then, the biggest one is the Watchful Spirit incantation, something she describes to be the spirit of her son, manifesting above our head and firing out several holy blasts similar to the Horned Bairn item. More interestingly though, with this incantation, is its description, where we're told that this is an entreaty received from the Empyrean Grandam, which implies one of two things. Either Hornsent Grandam was or is herself an Empyrean, or perhaps served an Empyrean as a grandmother-like figure. Empyreans, of course, are beings capable of ascending to full godhood and taking on the power of the Elden Ring, amongst whom we already have Malenia and Miquella, Ranni, and of course, Marika, the Empyrean of the Elden Ring, who I think perhaps this woman may have served at some point. That would explain Marika betraying the Hornsent and Hornsent Grandam's personal beef with Marika, calling her repeatedly a strumpet. An insult that would imply Marika to be adulterous, I suppose, which we know to be true, as she cheated on Godfrey with herself. Or Radahn, I suppose. Though, this whole thing does lead me to theorize whether Marika was originally originally tied up with someone from Hornsent Grandam's bloodline, making her a grandmother-in-law to Marika. Otherwise, it's worth entertaining the notion that Grandam could have ascended to godhood herself once, perhaps explaining her residual power to call on the divine beasts. But again, this window of speculation can only be unlocked by not missing the questline in the first place. Same as the scorpion stew, which Grandam will provide on subsequent visits, made from the claws of spider scorpions from around Bayle, and restoring 12 health per second across a minute, and upping physical damage negation by 10%, something which can also be given to Hornsent initially, in return for 3 furnace visages. Grandam will also provide an extra special gourmet variant when we return after defeating Messmer, but again, only if we've befriended her before doing so. And overall, since there aren't that many questlines across the DLC, and this one offers several tangible rewards as well as just a ton of lore, it's certainly a bad decision to accidentally skip it. No doubt the most kindly of the allies across the DLC, Samor is a gently spoken merchant clad in verdigris armor who, as he puts it, likes finding things. And whilst Samor may appear simply uncomfortable with using his words, the truth runs a little deeper. You see, while Samor may appear to be a stocky humanoid figure loyal to kindly Mikola, his loyalties also lie with the Forager brood, singular kindred of rot pests found across the realm of Shadow, who you absolutely do not want to attack, for several reasons. Now, given their usually very irritating and difficult to dodge pest thread spear attack, wiping these guys out on sight has pretty much become an automatic response for many of us, I think. And there are still many groups of pests, particularly around and under the ruins of Rao taken in by Romina, that are indeed still hostile, but there are 6 who aren't, found at these respective locations on the map, and who, if approached as friendly, will impart us with cookbooks. With these, we can mostly craft various pickled livers, which serve as weaker alternatives to the dried livers, but do provide alternate crafting recipes more made up of Shadow Realm material. Forager Brood number 4, outside of the Church of Consolation on Shadow Altus, also requires a little more care than the rest. Having been already injured, it can be healed by placing a warming stone nearby before imparting their usual book. This time for a holy proof pickled liver, which might be extremely useful later. We'll get to that. You'll also want to return to Moore himself after this one, who'll provide a 7th cookbook by way of gratitude for going above and beyond. Now, unlike the others, this book will provide recipes for spirit raisins, dried rada fruit, which allows Torrent to knock back enemies when galloping, and the charming branch, imitating Mikola's heart-stealing charm by transforming enemies into allies for a short time. Now, all of this is content that, for starters, does not want to be missed, and moreover wants to be done before approaching the Shadowkeep and breaking its charm, as after that we'll only get one more dialogue option with Moore, so you'll want to secure Cookbook 7 before that. However, the quote-unquote worst decision we can make when it comes to Moore and the Forager Brood is to mistakenly attack these usually very annoying pests. You see, Moore is not simply a friend to these guys, and in fact, they seem more like family. Ansbach refers to the Forager Brood as Moore's brethren, and later, Moore himself will talk about how they were abandoned by their mother, presumably Melania, since Romina, Saint of the Bard, was actually somebody to take in the kindred of rot, resulting again in that pinker hostile variety. So perhaps Moore was simply a human child, adopted into the brood and raised alongside the pests. It would explain his staggered speech and close kinship with the bugs. Or perhaps Moore is in fact some sort of spirit, much like Gary, back in Caelid, who inhabits the vessels of the kindred of rot, creating an illusion to make them appear in his visage. Indeed, Moore is clad constantly in verdigris armor, a metal which itself is a gift from an outer god, and we're never supposed to see what he looks like under this. His shield specifically is said to continue to protect its targets even if its bearer should die, and perhaps this is suggesting that Moore is a kindred of rot spirit, simply possessing a suit of verdigris armor and not himself existing in physical form. Though whatever the actual case may be, should we accidentally or deliberately kill any of these nice bugs, Moore will not be happy, and if anything, this reaction is just a reason to remain sad forever.
One of the Forager brood was killed. This thing is a tragedy. This thing cannot be forgiven.
And doing this will also lose our continued friendship with the Forager brood, denying all of those continued free cookbooks for literally no reason, though it gets worse. And this may only be the case with the injured Forager outside the church again, but upon killing this one, Moore will personally invade to try and defend his brethren, where we'll be forced to defeat him too.
You hurt one of the Forager brood. Hurt. Forager brood, please.
And the fact that even as he's dying, his final words are begging us to leave the rest alone only makes this thing even more sad. It will unlock Moore's armor and bell bearing in this moment, but in fairness, you'd most likely have picked that up anyway later on, without needing to needlessly attack Moore's beloved family, who wanted only to give back to his friends. Really, there's no reason to do this, but if you are going for an evil playthrough, then it really is up there as one of the worst decisions. Denying yourself free stuff for absolutely nothing, long term anyway, in return. Bayle. Vile Bayle. Solid of scale and one of the best boss fights in Elden Ring, in my opinion. From the arena, the spectacular looking attack phases that Bayle throws at us, and of course the unforgettable lines screamed by Egon as we fight the dragon that double-beheaded Placidusax. Again, I discuss more lore on this one in my main bosses explained video. Now, Bayle is not a boss we have to fight on our journey to becoming Elden Lord, and the two lore reasons given for heading up this mountain at all are that A, Egon begs us for help in exacting his revenge on Bayle, and B, because a dragon priestess, formerly an ancient dragon herself named Florisax, asked us to, promising that to do so would be the purest form of dragon communion, unlocking one of two unique and exceptionally powerful dragon communion incantations, which are only going to work for those with 49 arcane or above. Bayle doesn't drop a remembrance per se, but in essence, the heart of Bayle is his remembrance. But not officially being one does come with some major lore implications, and does kind of make you wonder what Florisax's actual intentions were in having us kill and devour the hearts of the Dread Dragon. Because yes, whilst we will absorb the power of Bayle, it also sounds as though we will bring his very soul into our own being. Quote, even after being consumed, the throbbing heart of Bayle continues to resist its subjugation, never weakening. One day, the fire within will consume the very body and soul of its communion devourer. One day. End quote. Now, I don't know about you, but this sounds a lot like the power of the frenzied flame, an all-consuming, writhing chaos from within, albeit in this case, one that takes a little longer to work its way into being. And whatever main ending we choose for the game's lore, out of these 6 on offer, whether that's becoming Marika's consort or Rani's, may very well wind up eventually transforming into the Age of Bayle, something the Dread Dragon wanted several ages ago when he first challenged Placidusax. Though quite what he'd do after inheriting the world is a little more of a mystery. Maybe bring about an age where the Drakes reign supreme. I don't know. Though it would only be a frenzied flame ending in this case, where I imagine his spirit would be burned away before resurfacing, since we know the Flame of Frenzy has the power to do that. It's one of those decisions that don't really affect the playthrough all that much. If anything, having an incantation of his is a positive. But in terms of the lore afterwards, could potentially tarnish your ending when you look at the actual implications of consuming it. The ally NPCs of the DLC. It's a pretty loose term, I suppose, to describe all of the characters that we meet. Initially, Leda, Freya, Hornsent, Ansbach, Moore, Tiolier, and Dane are all indeed allies, united in common service to kindly Miquella, thanks to his heart-stealing charm, right up until the point that they're not. And approaching the Shadowkeep, we'll hear that somewhere a great rune has broken, and so too has a powerful charm. This rune can be found at the base of the Erdtree on the Erdtree avatar, interestingly. But more to the point, this is the time that the NPCs regain their free will. Contextually, within the story I mean, not actually in real life, because that'd be terrifying. So some remain on the path devoted to Miquella, whilst others return to former pursuits. And that causes problems especially for Needle Knight Leda. Originally, Leda was part of an organization known as the Oathseeker Knights, who set off on quests of discovery, hoping to find by themselves an oath of their own choosing to serve in perfect, lifelong devotion. And it seems several of these Oath-Seeker Knights formed into the Needle Knights, swearing their oath in service to Miquella, but now they are no more. Save for one. Leda didn't need to be charmed by Miquella, as she already chose, of her own free will, to serve him. But having gotten to know the others in this time, she begins to analyze their true motivations, ascertaining if they are threats to Miquella, before opting to eliminate them as a precaution. Of course, she fails for a good long while to pick up on the biggest threat to Miquella, and that's us, but that, out of the box, is a reason not to go along with Leda's plans here. After all, why aid a servant who works in direct service to a rival god and lord? But let's hear her out anyway. Initially, Leda's intentions turn towards Hornsent, a citizen of the tower whose primary goal, understandably, is to seek vengeance against Messmer, something Leda assesses to be a risk since Miquella too is Marika's offspring. The vile strumpet, who originally betrayed the Hornsent, burned the divine beasts, and used the Gate of Divinity to ascend to godhood. Leda suspects or worries that Hornsent's lust for vengeance may one day turn him towards Miquella, and must therefore be eliminated just in case. So, in the burning longboat courtyard of the Shadowkeep, we're presented with our first choice of summons: aid the Hornsent or aid Leda. And both choices have pros and cons. But actually, in terms of the lore, this isn't the main worst decision of this chain of choices. And to get that, I would argue the best thing to do here is to ignore this fight entirely, as far as story goes, since we can then summon Hornsent for the Messmer fight, and get some exposition from him during and after, only to learn that actually, yeah, Hornsent does want to wipe out all of Marika's offspring. In fact, he wants vengeance against everything that lives under the light of the Erdtree. Well fella, you're too late, because I already burned it. Still, Leda at this point actually perceives him to no longer be a threat, given how utterly absorbed by vengeance he now is. If we had done the fight, then siding with Hornsent would have netted us the Swift/Ash of War, which actually serves as an insanely powerful PvP Ash, but it will lock us out of the next fight. Siding with Leda won't, but will of course make Hornsent unavailable for the Messmer fight. Though, by siding with her, we will get the unique Needle Talisman, the Lacerating Crossed Tree, which enhances our dash attacks by 15%. Really, if you don't care about the Hornsent lore, then maybe choose this option, but after defeating Messmer, Leda will have identified a new target.
I'm afraid Sir Ansbach will have to be next. He insists that he's nothing but a worn-down, over-the-hill soldier. But in his day, he was the feared commander of the pure-blood knights, who cleaved open Miquella the Kime with his blood blade. He claims he hasn't the spirit to take up his sword again, but I doubt it'll be very long before he recalls, as I have, the cascading sheets of blood. I'm afraid he cannot be left to fester.
Look, if any NPC deserves the title of Top G in Shadow of the Erdtree, then it's Ansbach. This is the guy that initially we can come to for information and lore on the crosses around the lands of Shadow, who theorizes early on that Miquella cast off St. Trina at the fissure. This is also the guy who, with the Secret Rite Scroll, deduces that Miquella seeks to revive Radahn through Mohg's body. And Ansbach is ultimately one of the only two NPCs who sticks with us right through to the end, alongside Tiolier. Admittedly, they both do have their own reasons. Tiolier is carrying out St. Trina's wish, and Ansbach seeks to preserve the dignity of Lord Mohg, but even still, Ansbach, of all people, had his goals most aligned with ours, and to strike him down alongside Leda after this is a terrible, terrible shame. And even when we join the fight on Leda's side against Ansbach, he simply says this.
So you've taken Lady Leda's side. I'm glad she stands with an ally. She tends to overestimate the burden she might carry alone.
As opposed to Leda's response, which is this.
I suppose it was Sir Ansbach who won you over. Fine. One more heart that I've laid to sleep.
But of course, as with all of these choices, there is some tangible benefit to siding with Leda, which in this case is Leda's retaliatory crossed T. And I guess her attack on Ansbach was something of a retaliation on Miquella's behalf, since he did apparently cleave Miquella open. And this talisman will enhance our attacks after rolling or backstepping by a full 17%. Pretty good, to be fair, if like me, your whole damage negation tactic involves well-timed rolls. And whether or not we actually side with Ansbach in this case, we will still get his bow, though we will miss out on getting the Furious Blade of Ansbach Blood Incantation later on at the end of the main quest. Plus, siding with Leda in this case will only lead to betrayal in the end, once she realizes that we too seek the Elden Throne. But sticking with Ansbach actually unlocks us a friend for life, well, his life, which is rare in this game. Hell, before the final fight, we'll even confess to him that it was we who defeated Lord Moog, and his reaction is nothing but forgiving.
It was you, wasn't it, who defeated Lord Moog? Fear not. I bear no grudge against you. His Eminence was felled in an honorable duel, and such are the risks of seeking lordship. Besides, what right have I to complain? I blame the enchantment more than anything. Righteous tarnished, we will have our victory. I swear upon my blood.
So let me know in the comments what you guys think of this one, but personally, when it comes to Leda v Ansbach, there's only really one choice in my opinion, as far as story is concerned. And it really is mostly for the story that we want to keep Ansbach alive, because the final worst decision of Shadow of the Erdtree relates to the final boss fight, Tarnished versus Promised Consort Radahn, or even more so Radahn, Consort of Miquella. Now, there's not specifically a right way to do this fight, but there is a wrong way, or rather a string of do's and don'ts, which can tip the scales between very hard and nigh on impossible. Remember earlier, I mentioned that the remains of Miquella's Great Rune are down at the Shadow Tree base with the Shadow Tree avatar? Well, you're going to want to go and get that before this fight, as it's the only way to dispel Miquella's one chance, instant death, hard stolen grab. Now, getting to the avatar involves draining the Shadowkeep's church district and taking an elevator in the bottom floor of the church down to the tree worship sanctum. This giant sunflower will then require defeating 3 times in a row. Again, it's lore I've discussed in a previous video, but doing so will obtain the fragments of a once great rune, now reduced merely to a reusable item with the power to resist charms. And what it'll do is dissipate this little angel above our head, which marks us after Miquella's first grab, removing the heart-stolen effects, which would have taken hold were we grabbed again. Second, Miquella's holy attacks in Phase 2 of the fight are utterly crazy, a nigh-on undodgeable light show to whittle us down via attrition across Phase 2. Luckily, there are some countermeasures, with the main one being found, I think by design, back where it all started, in Marika's Shaman village. The Golden Braid is an item picked up from a figure embedded in a tree known as the Grandmother, and said to be placed there by Marika as a prayer, or a wish, or a confession. And I wonder if the Grandmother is supposed to reflect Hornsent Grandam, if she did indeed have a role in Marika's life. What do you guys think about that one? Well, the Golden Braid of Marika, at any rate, boosts our holy damage negation by the utmost, and that is absolutely a talisman you'll want to collect and equip in this fight. And finally, we have the question of whether or not to summon Ansbach and Tialier to assist, provided their respective questlines are done and they are available at this point. Now, of course, there's already a stigma around summons that they make the game too easy, but in this case, actually, I'd say using at least these NPC summons makes the Radahn fight a whole lot harder. Just take a look at Radahn's health bar here. When hit for the same amount of damage, it depletes far quicker when fighting Radahn solo than with these 2 summons. So bringing in Ansbach and Tialier effectively bolsters Radahn's health massively, dragging out the fight for far longer, and thus lengthening the window whereby we can potentially die. As Radahn's fight is already a war of attrition, especially in round 2, this is more of a hindrance than a help, really. Now, granted, the latest update did buff both summons a fair bit, and we can carefully sit back for a time and simply observe, but these 2 alone cannot carry us to victory. And you'll probably find, after learning to time his counters, Radahn's health to be depleting a lot quicker with just you and Ash summons. So make sure to enter the fight with Miquella's Great Rune and the Golden Braid. Bring some dried or holy proof pickled liver as well to negate holy damage even further, and maybe refrain from summoning Ansbach and Tialier, and you should have a slightly better time with this boss. Mind you, summoning them in once and having them die will afford some sad but awesome death dialogue, highlighting further just what utter G's these 2 were fighting alongside us.
It's up to you now. Grant us a treat.
fact, after the fight, regardless of whether they were summoned, Ansbach and Thiolier can be found strewn across the arena, confirming that canonically they did fight Radahn and Mikola alongside us, and they did die. Just a shame that in doing so within the actual game, Radahn does have like double or triple health. But I suppose FromSoft wanted their hardest boss ever to have no workarounds, regardless of the fact that usually summoning NPCs for fights is just our reward for questing better. But ultimately, the second Radahn boss fight remains the ultimate test of player skill, and something I find helps improve my alertness and focus when playing this game are the many flavors on offer from Gamersupps, a brand I've been using for several months now to give me that much needed boost for longer gaming sessions, especially for the likes of Elden Ring. With their ingredients to boost energy, brain power, and eye health, as well as the huge range of choice when it comes to flavors, there's bound to be something you'll enjoy. They also do a free sample pack for new customers to try, so be sure to check it out through my link down below. Thank you for watching 5 of the worst decisions you can make for one reason or another in Shadow of the Erdtree, and let me know in the comments how you guys got on with these. If you enjoyed the video, then likes are always greatly appreciated. Subscribe for more Elden Ring, and as always, massive thank you to the patrons for helping to keep the channel alive. I'm Sam Bram, and have a great day.